I never imagined that my life could change in a single evening. It was a Tuesday like any other, or at least that's what I thought. I came home from work, tired but satisfied after a long day at the architectural firm where I had worked for 5 years. The smell of the beef bourguignon I had prepared that morning still hung in the air, reminding me that I had something to celebrate, my wedding anniversary. Mark, my husband, was due to return around 8 p.m. I had everything prepared, the table set with our beautiful dishes, the candles lit, a bottle of Bordeaux just waiting to be uncorked. I even made myself beautiful, putting on this black dress that he loved so much. The wait seemed endless, but I told myself it was worth it. 5 years of marriage was no small thing. When the front door finally opened, my heart leapt. But it wasn't Mark who entered. It was his mother, Marguerite. His face was closed, his lips pursed in a thin line that didn't bode well. I stood up to greet him, trying to hide my disappointment. "Good evening, Marguerite. I didn't know you had to come by this evening. Mark shouldn't be long, we." She cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Spare me your salam aleks, Elodie. Mark will not come home this evening. Nor the following evenings for that matter." His words hit me like a punch. I stood there speechless, unable to understand what she meant. Marguerite took advantage of my silence to continue, her voice becoming more and more acerbic. "Did you really think this was going to last? That a man like my son was going to be content with a woman like you? A little provincial architect with no ambition, incapable of giving him a child after 5 years of marriage?" Every word was like a stab. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to break down in front of her. I clenched my fists, searching for the strength to respond, to defend myself. But Marguerite didn't give me the chance. Mark finally opened his eyes. He met someone else, someone who is worthy of him. A woman who will give him the family he deserves. The world started to spin around me. I held on to the back of a chair to keep from falling. It was impossible. Mark couldn't do that to me. Not after everything we'd been through together. "You're lying," I finally managed to say. "Mark loves me." "He doesn't." Marguerite's laughter cut me short. A cold, contemptuous laugh, which echoed in the living room like a death knell. "Love? My poor girl, you are even more naive than I thought. Love is not enough. Mark needs a woman who can help him climb the ladder, not a ball and chain who pulls him down." I felt anger rising within me, washing away the shock and sadness. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You have no right to." The door opened again. This time it was Mark. His face was pale, his eyes shifty. He didn't even try to look directly at me. In that moment, I knew that everything Marguerite had said was true. "Mark," I whispered, "tell me it's not true. Tell me your mother is lying." He looked up at me, and what I saw there broke my heart. It wasn't love, or even remorse. It was pity, mixed with cold determination. "I'm sorry, Elodie," he said in a voice that sounded false. "But it's over. I already collected my things this afternoon. I thought my mother would explain things to you more gently." Marguerite gave a little satisfied laugh. "Oh, I made things very clear, darling. Your wife is just a little slow to understand." I looked around, noticing for the first time that some things were missing. Our wedding photos had disappeared from the buffet. Mark's favorite armchair was no longer there. How could I not have seen him when I came home? "How long has it been?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark shrugged his shoulders, looking embarrassed. "A few months. Listen, Elodie, it's no one's fault. We tried, but it doesn't work between us anymore. Celine and I, Celine." The name escaped me like a scream. "Celine, your colleague. The one you swore to me was just a friend." He at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "Things happen, Elodie. You can't control your feelings." I felt something break inside me. All those evenings where he came home late, claiming extra work. All those weekends cancelled at the last minute for office emergencies. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. "You lied to me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "For months you lied to me, you deceived me, and now you dare to come here with your mother to tell me it's over." Marguerite stepped forward, her face twisted with contempt. Don't act innocent, my little one. You must have known that it would end like this. A woman who respects herself would have understood long ago that her husband no longer loved her. I felt rage rising inside me like a wave. Without thinking, I grabbed the vase from the coffee table and threw it with all my might. It crashed into the wall, right next to Marguerite's head, exploding into 1,000 pieces. Get out! I yelled. You too get out of my house. Mark rushed towards his mother, protecting her with his body. You're crazy, he shouted. See, that's exactly why I'm leaving you. You're unstable, unable to control yourself. I burst into bitter laughter. Unstable? Me? She's the best. You're cheating on me, you're lying to me, you're destroying our marriage, and I'm the one who's unstable? Marguerite stood up, straightening her skirt with a nervous gesture. My son is right. You are dangerous. We should call the police. Go ahead, I spat. Call them. Tell them how you came here to humiliate me and throw me out like trash. Mark shook his head, looking tired. No one is going to call the police, Elodie. We are going to leave, and you are going to calm down. Tomorrow, my lawyer will contact you to discuss the terms of the divorce. The word divorce rang through the room like a clap of thunder. It was real. It was happening. My marriage, my life, everything was falling apart around me. What about the house? I asked, suddenly aware that I might lose everything. I paid most of the contribution. Marguerite smiled cruelly. Oh, my darling, do you really think that matters? Mark's lawyer is the best in Paris. You will get nothing, absolutely nothing. I felt my legs give way beneath me. I collapsed onto the couch, unable to hold back my tears any longer. Mark took a step towards me, as if he was going to console me, but his mother held him back. Leave her, darling. She's not worth it. Let's go. They left without another word, leaving me alone in this house which, a few hours earlier, had still been my home. The silence that followed their departure was deafening. I looked around, my eyes brimming with tears. The table set for our anniversary, the candles that were still burning, the bottle of wine that had not been opened. Everything seemed to be laughing at me. I don't know how long I stayed there, prostrate on the couch, crying my eyes out. When I finally managed to stand up, my legs were shaking. I grabbed my purse and coat, unable to bear the thought of staying another minute in this house full of now poisoned memories. As I walked through the door, I took one last look at what had been my life for 5 years. Then I slammed the door behind me, finding myself alone in the Parisian night, without knowing where to go or what the future had in store for me. But one thing was certain, I would not let Mark and his mother destroy me. I was going to fight, for my dignity, for my future, for everything I still believed in. The night was cool, and the streets of Paris seemed strangely empty. Or maybe it was me who felt empty, emptied of all substance, of all hope. I walked aimlessly, letting my steps guide me through the familiar alleys of my neighborhood. Every street corner, every cafe, every bench seemed to remind me of a moment shared with Mark. Our first meeting at the Café de Flore, our walk hand in hand along the Seine, this little Italian restaurant where he proposed to me. Now all these memories had a bitter taste. How could I have been so blind? How had I not seen the signs? Questions swirled through my head, unanswered, leaving me even more lost and distraught. The streets of Paris, usually so lively, seemed strangely hostile that evening. Every shadow made me jump, every noise made my blood run cold. I walked aimlessly, letting my steps guide me through the maze of alleys and boulevards. The Eiffel Tower shone in the distance, unchanging and indifferent to my sorrow. I don't know how long I wandered like that, lost in thought, constantly replaying the scene that had just unfolded in my living room. Marguerite's cruel words still echoed in my head, mixing with Mark's icy silence. How did we get here? How could the man I loved, the one who had sworn loyalty to me before the altar of the St. Sulpice Church, betray me like this? My steps led me to the Luxembourg Gardens. At this late hour, the park was closed, but I sat on a bench just in front of the gates. It was here that Mark kissed me for the first time, one sunny Sunday afternoon. I remembered her shy smile, the softness of her lips, the promise of a radiant future that I read in her eyes. Where had this man gone? The cold of the night was beginning to pierce me, but I had nowhere to go. The idea of returning to our house, no, his house now, was unbearable. I didn't have any close friends in Paris. Mark had always been jealous, he didn't like me going out without him. Little by little, I lost contact with my old acquaintances, finding myself isolated without even realizing it. A group of young people walked past me, laughing and singing, probably on their way to a party. Their carefree joy hurt me. Just a few hours ago, I was like them, happy and hopeful. Now, here I was, alone on a bench, with no money, no shelter, no future. Tears started to flow down my cheeks again. I wiped them angrily. I didn't want to cry anymore. I didn't want to be weak anymore. But the pain was too strong, too recent. Every happy memory turned into a sharp blade that tore through my heart. A man approached my bench. Tall, with an unshaven face, he staggered slightly. My heart started beating faster. What did he want from me? "Hey, sweetie," he said in a slurred voice. "You don't look like yourself. Can I buy you a drink?" I shook my head, unable to speak. Fear choked my throat. The man insisted, sitting down heavily next to me on the bench. "Come on, don't be shy. A pretty girl like you shouldn't be alone at this hour." His hand rested on my thigh. I jumped off the bench, my heart pounding. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice shaking with fear and anger. The man laughed, getting up as well. "Oh, a wildling. I like that." At this moment, a loud voice sounded behind us. "Is there a problem here?" A police officer approached, his hand resting on the baton on his belt. The man swore under his breath before staggering away. The policeman turned to me, his face expressing both suspicion and concern. "Is everything okay, he asked me. I nodded, unable to speak. The events of the evening, the fear I had just felt, everything was mixed together in my head. I collapsed on the bench, shaking with uncontrollable sobs. The police officer sat next to me, keeping a respectful distance. "Want me to call someone? A friend, a family member?" I shook my head. Who could I have called? Mark. The idea made me laugh bitterly through my tears. I have nowhere to go," I finally confessed in a whisper. The policeman sighed. He must have been used to this type of situation. "There's a women's shelter not far from here. I can take you there if you want. You'll be safe there for the night." I hesitated. The idea of a home scared me. Wasn't that admitting that I had hit rock bottom? But did I really have a choice? Okay, I finally agreed. The ride in the police car was silent. I watched the streets of Paris pass by, this city that I loved so much and which suddenly seemed so hostile to me. We ended up stopping in front of an anonymous building in the 13th arrondissement. "There you go," said the policeman. "They'll take good care of you here. Take care of yourself, I thanked him in a barely audible voice before getting out of the car. The home was austere, but clean. An older woman greeted me with a tired but kind smile. "Good evening, my little one. My name is Mathilde. You are safe here." She led me to a small, Spartan room. A bed, a wardrobe, a chair. It was all I had left now. "Breakfast is served at 8 a.m., Mathilde explained to me. "Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is another day." Once alone, I sat on the bed, overcome with emotion. How could my life have changed so quickly? Just this morning, I was a married woman, with a career, a house, a future. And now here I was, in this home, with nothing but the clothes I was wearing. Sleep finally overtook me, a restless sleep populated by nightmares where I saw Mark and Celine laughing at me, where Marguerite chased me, screaming that I was a good-for-nothing. The next morning, I woke up with a throbbing headache. For a brief moment, I thought it had all been a bad dream. Then reality hit me hard. It wasn't a nightmare. It was my new life. I went down to breakfast with a heavy heart. The common room was filled with women of all ages, some with children. Their faces bore the marks of fatigue, fear, sadness. Was I like them now? Mathilde came and sat next to me. "Slept well, my little one?" I shrugged my shoulders. What could I tell him? Look, she continued, I don't know what happened to you, and you don't have to tell me. But know that you're not alone. We have counselors here who can help you. And if you need legal help, we can put you in contact with associations. His words made me realize that I needed to act. I couldn't let it get me down. Mark wanted to see me disappear. Well, I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Thank you, I said to Mathilde. I think I could use some help with a divorce. She nodded understandingly. We will help you. But first, take the time to rest, to think. Rome was not built in a day, as they say. The following days were difficult. I had to face the reality of my new situation. I called my boss to explain that I wouldn't be able to come to work for a few days. He sounded understanding, but I could sense in his voice that he was uncomfortable. How long would he keep me if my personal situation became too complicated? I also had to deal with divorce paperwork. The lawyer recommended to me by the Home Association was a patient and competent man, but his explanations made me realize the magnitude of the battle that awaited me. Mark had money, connections. I had nothing. But as the days passed, something began to change within me. The pain was still there, of cower. The feeling of betrayal too. But a new emotion was beginning to emerge, anger. Not destructive anger, no. An anger that pushed me to fight, to not let myself be defeated. I started attending the workshops offered by the home. Yoga, meditation, discussion group. There I met other women who, like me, had seen their lives turned upside down overnight. Their stories were different from mine, but we all shared the same desire to rebuild ourselves. One evening, when I was returning from a particularly moving discussion group session, I ran into Mathilde in the hallway. You look different, she told me with a smile. Really? I asked, surprised. She nodded. Yes. When you came here, you looked broken. Now I see a glint in your eyes. A glimmer of determination. His words made me think. Had I really changed in such a short time? Maybe. Or maybe this strength had always been inside me, waiting for the right moment to manifest itself. That night, lying on my narrow bed, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Mark and his mother destroy my life. I was going to fight, not only to get what was rightfully mine in the divorce, but also to rebuild myself, to become stronger. The road would be long and difficult, I knew it. But for the first time since that terrible evening, I felt a glimmer of hope rising within me. I was no longer the broken woman who had wandered the streets of Paris. I was a survivor, and I was ready to face whatever life had in store for me. As I began to fall asleep, a thought occurred to me. Tomorrow I will call my childhood friend, Sophie. It had been years since we last spoke, Mark having always found a reason for me not to maintain this friendship. It was time to reconnect, to remember who I was before becoming Madame Dupont. Sleep finally took me, but this time, my dreams weren't filled with nightmares. For the first time in a long time, I dreamed of the future, of hope, and of the woman I could become. The next morning, I woke up with new determination. The night had been short, but refreshing. I took a quick shower in the shared toilets of the home, put on the same clothes as the day before, the only ones I had now, and I went downstairs for a coffee. I sat at the shared kitchen table, staring at my phone. Sophie's number was displayed there, my finger hesitant above the call button. It's been so long. What if she didn't want to talk to me? What if she had changed her number? What if? A problem with your phone? Mathilde's voice startled me. She sat across from me, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. I shook my head. No, I'm hesitant to call an old friend. Mathilde smiled softly. You know, little one, at times like this, we find out who our true friends are. Don't be afraid to call. At worst, she won't answer. At best, you'll find an ally. His words gave me the courage I lacked. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear, my heart pounding. 1, 2, 3 rings. Then, hello. Sophie's voice. Unchanged after all these years. Sophie. It's Elodie. A silence. Then a cry of joy. Elodie. My God, it's been forever. How are you? Where are you? The words rushed through my throat. How to explain to him? Where to start? Sophie, I need help. There was another silence, but different this time. I could almost feel Sophie's worry through the phone. What's going on, Elodie? Where are you? I took a deep breath and unpacked everything. Mark, Marguerite, betrayal, home. The words flowed like a torrent, interspersed with sobs that I could no longer hold back. When I finally finished, Sophie remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. Give me the address of the home, she finally said. I'm coming. 2 hours later, I was sitting on a bench in front of the fireplace, waiting for Sophie with a mixture of anxiety and hope. When a little blue Citroën parked in front of me, my heart skipped a beat. Sophie came out, her blonde hair cut short, her blue eyes scanning the surroundings until they landed on me. Elodie. We threw ourselves into each other's arms, crying and laughing at the same time. It was as if the years of separation had never happened. I'm so sorry, Sophie whispered. I should have insisted, I should have. I shook my head. No, it's me. I should have seen what was happening, I should have been stronger. Sophie took me by the shoulders, looking me straight in the eyes. Listen to me carefully, Elodie Dubois. You have nothing to reproach yourself for. That bastard manipulated you, he isolated you. But it's over now. Do you hear me? It's over. His words, his presence, all of this gave me a strength I didn't know I had. For the first time since that terrible evening, I felt that I was no longer alone. Come on, grab your things, Sophie said. You come to my house. I hesitated. I don't want to bother you. You probably have your life, your work. Sophie waved my objections away. I have an apartment with a spare bedroom in Montmartre. I work from home most of the time. And above all, you are my best friend. There is no way I will leave you in a hostel while I have room. I almost protested again, but Sophie's determined look dissuaded me. I thanked Mathilde for her help, promising to give news, and I followed Sophie to her car. The ride to Montmartre was filled with casual conversations. Sophie told me about her life since our last meeting, her work as a freelance graphic designer, her travels, her loves. I realized how narrow my life had been in recent years, reduced to my relationship and my work. Sophie's apartment was like her, colorful, warm, full of life. Abstract paintings covered the walls, green plants flourished in every corner. It was so different from the cold, impersonal interior that Mark had imposed on us. Here's your room, Sophie said, opening a door. It's not the Ritz, but it's your home for as long as you need it. I put my bag, my only luggage, on the bed and looked around me. The room was small but bright, with a view of the rooftops of Paris. Sophie, I don't know how to thank you. She cut me off with a gesture. You don't have to thank me. That's what friends are for. Now we'll take care of you. First, a good shower, clean clothes, and then we'll go shopping. You need a new wardrobe. I wanted to protest that I didn't have any money, but Sophie didn't give me time. I'm the one who invites you. Consider it all the birthday presents I've missed over the last few years. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sophie helped me contact a reputable lawyer who was a friend of one of her clients. She accompanied me to my work to explain the situation to my boss. She even organized a party with some of her friends, introducing me as my best friend who just moved to Paris. Little by little, I began to regain my footing. Sophie's support was invaluable, but more than anything, it was her confidence in me that touched me. She didn't treat me like a victim, but like a survivor. One evening, as we sat on her balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sun set over Montmartre, Sophie asked me a question that would change my life. Have you ever thought about starting your own architecture firm? I almost choked on my wine. What? Me? No, I could never. Sophie raised an eyebrow. And why not? You are talented, you have experience. And above all, you have ideas that your current boss does not fully value. It was true. For months, I had been proposing more ecological, more innovative designs, but my boss systematically rejected them, preferring to stay within traditional patterns. But I have no money, no contacts. Sophie smiled. Money, we can find solutions. There is help for women entrepreneurs, microcredits. And for contacts, well, You have me. I have clients who are always looking for new ones. Talents for their projects. The idea began to germinate in my mind. What if that was the solution? What if, instead of fighting to recover the crumbs of my previous life, I built something new, something that would truly be mine? You know what? I said, raising my glass. I think I'll give it some serious thought. Sophie toasted with me, her smile wider than ever. That's all thought out, my dear. Tomorrow, we start working on your business plan. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how far I had come since that terrible evening when my life was turned upside down. I had lost a lot, it's true. But I had also gained something priceless, the freedom to be myself, to pursue my dreams without having to justify or apologize. The next morning, Sophie and I started working on my business project. It was exciting and terrifying at the same time. There was so much to do, so much to learn. But for the first time in a long time, I felt alive, full of energy and hope. The weeks passed, filled with research, meetings, administrative paperwork. Sophie introduced me to people who became mentors, advisors, and perhaps future clients. I discovered within myself resources that I never suspected, an ability to negotiate, to convince, to fight for my ideas. Of course, everything wasn't rosy. There were still moments of doubt, nights when I woke up in tears, haunted by memories of my life before. The divorce proceedings were still ongoing, and every time I had to confront Mark or his lawyers, it was like ripping a scab off a barely healed wound. But every day I got a little stronger. Every small success, every obstacle overcome was a victory not only over my circumstances, but also over my own fears and insecurities. One morning, while I was preparing my first real presentation for a potential client, Sophie came into the kitchen, a big smile on her face. "Look what I just got," she said, handing me an envelope. It was an invitation to a contemporary art exhibition in a renowned gallery in the Marais. Sophie was invited as a graphic designer who worked on the exhibition catalogue. "And guess what?" she added with a wink. "I'm allowed to bring a guest. Would you like to come with me?" I hesitated. The idea of finding myself at a social event, surrounded by people from art and business, terrified me a little. What if I met someone who knew Mark? What if I wasn't up to it? As if reading my thoughts, Sophie placed her hand on mine. "You are no longer the woman you were a few months ago, Elodie. You are strong, you are beautiful, and you have so much to offer. It's time for the world to see it." I took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right. I'll go with you." That evening, wearing a dress that Sophie had helped me choose, I stood in front of the mirror, almost not recognizing the woman looking back at me. My hair was cut short, in a modern style that highlighted my cheekbones. My eyes, once always downcast, now shone with a glimmer of confidence. "Ready?" Sophie asked, poking her head through my bedroom door. I smiled, a real smile that came from the heart. "Ready." As we left the apartment and headed to the gallery, I realized that this wasn't just a party. It was the start of a new chapter in my life. A chapter that I was going to write myself, with my own words, my own dreams. The future was uncertain, of course. There would still be challenges to face, obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait to see what life had in store for me. Because whatever happens, I now knew that I had the strength to face it. And above all, I was no longer alone. I had found in Sophie not only a friend, but an ally, a soul sister who believed in me more than I believed in myself. Together, we were ready to conquer Paris, make our dreams come true, and show the world what we were capable of. The adventure was only just beginning. The evening at the art gallery had been a success beyond my expectations. Not only had I managed to overcome my social anxiety, but I had even made some interesting contacts for my business project. I felt exhilarated, like I was rediscovering a part of myself that I had lost for a long time. The next morning, I sat in Sophie's sunny kitchen, sipping my coffee and thinking about the events of the day before. Sophie, already immersed in her laptop, was working on a new graphic project. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled in, "I think I'm really starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel." Sophie looked up with her screen, a warm smile on his lips. "I told you. You are much stronger than you think, Elodie. Our conversation was interrupted by the ringtone of my phone. An unknown number was displayed on the screen. Intrigued, I picked up. "Hello, Madame Dubois?" A male, professional voice. "I am Master Lefevre, notary. I would need to see you in my study as soon as possible. It is about an inheritance." My heart leaps. An inheritance? From whom? My parents were always alive, and I had no family close to my knowledge. "A heritage?" I repeated, incredulous. "There must be an error." "No, madam," insisted the notary. "This is the will of Madame Geneviève Rousseau. She has appointed you as her universal legatee." This name did not tell me anything. I took a puzzled look at Sophie, who looked at me with curiosity. I don't know that person," I admitted. "It is precisely for this reason that I would like to see you in person, Madame Dubois. Can you go to my study this afternoon?" Still in shock, I accepted the appointment. After hanging up, I explained the situation to Sophie, who seemed as surprised as I was. "Geneviève Rousseau," she repeatedly repeated. "This name vaguely tells me something. Wait, I'm going to look on the internet." A few clicks later, Sophie pushed an exclamation. "Oh my God, Elodie, look at that." She turned her computer to me. On the screen was displayed a newspaper article dating from a few weeks. The title announced, "Death of Geneviève Rousseau, Pioneer of Ecological Architecture." The article paints the portrait of a remarkable woman, visionary architect. Geneviève Rousseau had devoted her life to promoting an environmentally friendly architecture. She had designed innovative buildings throughout France, won numerous prizes, and was considered a figurehead of the ecological movement in the world of architecture. "But, why me?" I whispered, stunned. "I have never met her." Sophie raised her shoulders. "There is only one way to know it. Go to this meeting." The same afternoon, I found myself in the opulent office of Maître Lefevre, in the heart of the 8th arrondissement. The notary, a man in his 50 years with a distinguished look, welcomed me with a benevolent smile. "Madame Dubois, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, inviting me to sit down. "I imagine you have a lot of questions." I hosted my head, unable to speak, so much the emotion hugged my throat. "First of all," continued Maître Lefevre, "I have to read you a letter that Madame Rousseau has left for you." He released an envelope from his file and extracted a sheet of paper. The voice of the notary was raised in the silence of the office, reading the words of a woman I had never known, but who was going to change my life. "Dear Elodie, if you read this letter, it is because I am no longer of this world. You don't know me, but I know you. At least, I know your work, your passion, your vision. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to see your projects during an exhibition of architecture students. Your designs, your approach to ecological architecture, all that touched me deeply. I saw in you the flame that animated me when I was your age, this desire to change the world, a building at a time. I have followed your journey since, discreetly. I saw how your ideas were often rejected, how your talent was underestimated. I recognized the obstacles I myself had to overcome years ago. I have no children, no nearby family. All my life, I devoted my energy to my work, to my vision of an architecture in harmony with nature. Today, I want this heritage to continue. And I think you are the ideal person to carry this torch. So I bequeath you all I have, my house in Giverny, my savings, my professional archives. But more than that, I bequeath you a dream. The dream of a world where our homes do not destroy the planet, but help to preserve it. I hope this legacy will give you the means to carry out your projects, to make your voice heard. The path will not be easy, but I know you can. Don't be afraid to dream of big, Elodie. The world needs visionaries like you. With all my affection and confidence. Geneviève Rousseau. When Maître Lefevre finished reading, I realized that tears ran down my cheeks. I was overwhelmed by emotion, by the confidence that this extraordinary woman had placed in me. Madame Dubois has slowly picked up the notary. I know that all this must be a shock for you. Take the time you need to assimilate this information. But know that the inheritance of Madame Rousseau is substantial. Besides his house in Giverny, there is an investment portfolio, copyright on his books and designs. In total, we are talking about a sum of around 3 million euros. I thought I was going to vanish. 3 million euros? It was a sum that I would never have imagined, even in my wildest dreams. I don't know what to say, have I stammered. Maître Lefevre smiled with understanding. You have nothing to say for the moment, Madame Dubois. Take the time to think. We will meet again in a few days to finalize the administrative details. I got out of the notarial study in a second state. The Paris sun seemed more brilliant, the streets more alive. Everything had changed in the space of an hour. Back at Sophie, I told my friend everything. She listened to me, her eyes wide, then hugged me in her arms. Oh, Elodie, she whispered, it's incredible. It's like a fairy tale. But it was not a fairy tale. It was reality. A reality that gave me vertigo. The following days were a whirlwind of intense emotions and reflections. I spent hours reading and rereading the letter from Geneviève Rousseau, looking at photos of her on the internet, studying her projects. The more I learned about her, the more I felt honored and frightened by the responsibility she had entrusted to me. A week after my visit to the notary, I made a decision. I asked Sophie to accompany me to Givigny to see Genevieve's house. The train journey from Paris only lasted for an hour, but I felt like I was traveling to another life. When we arrived in front of the house, I was breathless. It was a beautiful Norman residence, nestled in a lush garden which recalled that of Monet, located a few steps away. Inside, everything breathed the creativity and the love of nature. Architects' plans covered the walls, models of ecological buildings adorned the shelves. In Genevieve's office, I found notebooks filled with sketches and visionary ideas. It was there, sitting at the office of this extraordinary woman, that I made my final decision. I was not only going to accept this inheritance, I was going to do something big. Sophie, I said, turning to my friend who explored the library, I know what I'm going to do. She looked at me with curiosity. I listened to you. I will create a foundation. The Geneviève Rousseau Foundation for Ecological Architecture. I will use this money to promote and support sustainable architectural projects, to help young architects who have innovative ideas but not the means to realize them. Sophie's face has illuminated himself. It's a wonderful idea, Elodie. And that's not all, I continued, feeling excitement getting into me. I will transform this house into a research and training center on ecological architecture. A place where people can come and learn, exchange ideas, work on innovative projects. The more I spoke, the more my project took shape in my mind. I already saw the conference rooms filled with passionate students, the workshops buzzing with activity, the gardens serving as an open-air laboratory for new green construction techniques. What do you know? Said Sophie with a big smile. I think Geneviève Rousseau knew exactly what she was doing by choosing yourself. You're going to do great things, Elodie. At this moment, standing in this house full of history and promises, I felt a wave of gratitude gave me. Gratitude to Geneviève Rousseau, of course, but also to the life that had led me so far. Even the difficult moments, the betrayal of Mark, the pain of divorce, all of this had helped to lead me to this specific point. I looked out the window, towards the green garden. Somewhere, I was sure, Geneviève Rousseau smiled. His dream was going to live through me, and together we were going to change the world, a building at a time. The months that followed were the most intense in my life. The creation of the Geneviève Rousseau Foundation for Ecological Architecture required hard work, white nights, and flawless determination. But each obstacle surmounted, each little success won reminded me why I was doing it all. The transformation of Givigny's house into a research and training center was fast approaching. I had started a team of architects and passionate craftsmen who shared my vision. Together, we have redesigned each piece, every corner, to make it a place where innovation and respect for the environment would be at the heart of everything. Sophie, faithful to herself, had stayed by my side throughout this process. She had even supported all the visual identity of the foundation, creating a logo and a graphic charter that perfectly captured the spirit of our mission. One spring morning, when I supervised the installation of solar panels on the roof of the house, my phone rang. He was my lawyer. Madame Dubois, he said, I have news about your divorce. My heart sank. With everything that had happened in recent months, I had almost forgotten that this procedure was still in progress. Mark accepted all of our conditions, continued the lawyer. He renounces any claim on the house and accepts the sharing of goods as we proposed it. I had to sit on a nearby tool of tools. Really? But why this sudden turnaround? There was a silence on the other end of the line. It would seem that the financial situation of Mr. Dupont is no longer as favorable as before. His business is experiencing difficulties, and he prefers to settle this case quickly rather than engaging in a long legal battle. After hanging up, I stayed a motionless moment, lost in my thoughts. Part of me felt a certain satisfaction with the idea that Mark crossed difficult moments. But this thought was quickly replaced by pity. I did not want his misfortune, I just wanted to turn the page. The same evening, while I sat with Sophie on the newly furnished terrace of Giveney's house, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number that I only knew too well, that of Marguerite, my mother-in-law. I hesitated, my finger floating above the reject button. But something pushed me to drop out. "Hello," I said, the tense voice. "Elodie?" Marguerite's voice was unrecognizable. Far from her usual haughty, she seemed broken. "Elodie, I don't know where to start." I gave Sophie to leave myself alone. She hosted her head and returned to the house, leaving me in front of this unexpected conversation. "What do you want, Marguerite?" I asked, trying to keep a neutral tone. "I wanted to apologize," she said in a breath. "For everything. For the way I have treated you, for the horrible things that I said. I was wrong, so wrong." I was amazed. I would never have imagined to hear these words coming out of Marguerite's mouth. "What has changed?" I asked, suspicious. There was a long silence, then Marguerite broke out in sobs. Between two hiccups, she told me how Mark's business had gone bankrupt, how they had to sell their house, how all their friends had abandoned them. And then, she added, "I saw a report on you on television. On your foundation, on all that you do for the environment. You have succeeded, Elodie. You succeeded despite everything we made you undergo." I felt my throat tie. I didn't know what to answer. Part of me wanted to hang up on him, tell her that his apologies arrived too late. But another part, the one that had grown and matured in recent months, knew that forgiveness was stronger than resentment. "Marguerite," I said slowly, "thank you for your apologies. I can't say that everything is forgotten, but I appreciate your approach." "I understand," she whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I deeply regret my actions." After hanging up, I stayed for a long time on the terrace, looking at the sun on the garden. Sophie joined me, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Everything is fine?" she asked. I nodded, briefly telling him about the conversation. "You know," I added, "a few months ago, I would have given anything to hear Marguerite apologize. But now, it's as if it didn't really have its importance." Sophie smiled. "It is because you advanced, Elodie. You are no longer the same person as a few months ago." The next morning, when I was taking my coffee by reading the last reports on the progress of the work, I received a message from Mark. My heart leaps. It was the first time that he contacted me directly since our separation. "Elodie, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear, but I would like to talk to you. In person. Please." I thought about a long time before answering. Part of me wanted to refuse, definitively close this chapter of my life. But I knew that to really move forward, I had to face my past one last time. I agreed to meet him in a Parisian cafe, neutral land. Sophie insisted to accompany me, waiting for a neighboring table in case I need support. When Mark entered the coffee, I had a hard time recognizing it. The elegant man and sure of him that I had married had disappeared. In his place was held a man with drawn features, with vaulted shoulders, the air of having aged 10 years. "Elodie," he said while sitting in front of me, "thank you for agreeing to see me." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. I don't know where to start," he said, nervously passing his hand in his hair. "I guess you heard about my difficulties." "Yes," I just replied. He took a deep breath. "I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. For everything. For having cheated on you, for abandoning you, for letting my mother treat you in this way. I was a fool, Elodie. I felt tears getting into my eyes, but I turned them back. Why now, Mark? Because you lost everything? He shook his head. No, that's not it. Finally, not only losing my business, my house made me realize how stupid I had been. I spoiled everything, Elodie. Our wedding, our love, all that for an adventure without a future and selfish ambitions. I looked at him, looking in his eyes a trace of the man I liked. He was still there, somewhere, but so changed. And Celine? I asked, pronouncing for the first time the name of the woman for whom he had left me. Mark had a bitter laugh. As soon as the problems started. She was only interested in my money and my status. When I lost everything, she found another pigeon. I felt a pinch in the heart. Despite everything he had done to me, I couldn't help but experience compassion for him. I'm sorry that things went wrong for you, Mark, I said slowly. He looked up at me, surprised by my reaction. You don't have to be sorry, Elodie. It is me who should apologize 1,000 times. I saw what you have accomplished in recent months. Your foundation, your work. You are extraordinary. You has always been, and I was too blind to see it. We stayed a silent moment, sipping our cafes. The atmosphere was strange, a mixture of familiarity and distance. What are you going to do now? I ended up asking. Mark shrugged. I don't really know. Leaving zero, I suppose. Maybe leave Paris, start again elsewhere. I nodded. Then, almost without thinking, I said, you know, my foundation is looking for a manager to take care of the financial aspect of the projects. If you are interested. Mark looked at me, eyes wide. Would you offer me a job? After all that I did to you? I smiled slowly. I do not offer it to you because you are my ex-husband, Mark. I offer it to you because you are competent in this area. And maybe working for a cause that goes beyond your own interests would do you good. He remained silent for a long time, visibly moved. I don't know what to say, Elodie. You are really incredible. Leaving the coffee, I joined Sophie, who was waiting for me, worried. So, she asked. I had a deep inspiration, feeling a huge weight getting up of my shoulders. So, I think I finally turned the page. On the way back to Givony, I thought back to the whole path traveled. From that terrible night when my life had changed to this day when, finally, I felt in peace with my past. The tables had really turned, but not the way I would have imagined it. It was not a question of revenge or justice, but of personal growth and forgiveness. When I got home, I was welcomed by the team working on renovation. Their enthusiasm, their passion for our project reminded me why I was doing it all. It was not to prove anything to Mark or to anyone else. It was to build something bigger than me, something that could really make a difference in the world. That evening, sitting in Genevieve's garden, I felt a deep gratitude for me. Gratitude to this woman whom I had never met but who had changed my life. Gratitude to Sophie, my rock in the storm. And, strangely, even gratitude to the trials I had gone through. Because they had led me exactly where I had to be. The weeks following my meeting with Mark were a period of deep introspection. Each morning, waking up in Givony's house, I took a moment to meditate in the garden, listening to the song of birds and the rustling of the leaves. These moments of calm helped me to put my thoughts and my emotions in order. The proposal I had made to Mark to work for the foundation had not been an impulsive decision, contrary to what Sophie had first thought. It was the fruit of a long reflection on forgiveness and redemption. Of course, part of me was suspicious, fearing that it is only another manipulation on his part. But I had seen sincerity in his eyes, the real pain of regret. One morning, when I took my coffee on the terrace, I received a message from Mark. He accepted my offer, with a humility that I did not know him. I don't know if I deserve this chance, he wrote, but I promise to do my best to be up to your trust. I shared the news with Sophie, who remained skeptical. Are you sure of yourself, Elodie? She asked me, the concern visible on her face. After all he did. I took a deep inspiration before responding. I know it may seem crazy, Sophie, but I don't do that for him. I do it for myself. To be able to really turn the page and move forward without a bit. Sophie looked at me at length before nodding her head. I understand. And I trust you. You have grown so much in recent months, Elodie. If you think it's the right decision, then I support you. The following days were spent preparing Mark's arrival in the team. I organized a meeting with all the members of the foundation to explain the situation to them. I was surprised by their understanding and open-mindedness. Many have seen in this decision a concrete example of the values of forgiveness and second chance that we advocated in our work. The day Mark started working for the foundation arrived faster than I would have imagined. I welcomed it at the entrance to the property, noting its nervous air and its more relaxed outfit than usual. "Welcome, Mark," I said with a reassuring smile. "Ready for your first day?" He nodded, visibly moved. "Elodie, I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity." "Don't thank me," I replied. "Prove to me that I was right to trust you. That's all I ask." The first weeks were a challenge for everyone. Mark had to adapt to a work environment very different from what he had known, and the team had to learn to work with him despite his past. But little by little, things were set up. Mark turned out to be a precious asset for the foundation, bringing his financial expertise and his rigor in project management. One evening, while we were working late on an important file, Mark turned to me with a serious look. "Elodie, can I speak to you frankly?" I nodded, curious about what he was going to say. "I wanted to tell you how I am impressed by what you have accomplished here. This foundation, these projects. It's incredible. And I realize every day a little more to what extent I was stupid not to see your potential when we were married." His words touched me more than I thought possible. Not because I needed his validation, but because I finally saw the man I had married, the one who knew how to recognize the value of the others. "Thank you, Mark," I said slowly. "It means a lot for me." We stayed a silent moment, both plunged into our thoughts. Then Mark took the floor, hesitant. "I know maybe it's moved from me to ask that, but do you think you can forgive me completely?" The question took me off guard. I took the time to think before responding. "You know, Mark, forgiveness is not something that we decide overnight. It is a process. And I think that's what we are living, you and me. Each a day we work together, each project that we are doing well, it's one more step towards forgiveness." He nodded, his eyes brilliant with contained tears. "I understand. And I am grateful to you for each of these steps." This conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. We were no longer husband and woman, we would probably never be real friends, but we had found a balance, a form of mutual respect that allowed us to move forward. The months have passed, and the foundation continued to grow and prosper. We have launched new projects, organized international conferences on ecological architecture, and even started to work on a program of scholarships for young promising architects. One day, while I was preparing a presentation for a large conference in Paris, I received an unexpected call. It was Marguerite. "Elodie," she said, her trembling voice with emotion, "I wanted to tell you that I visited the exhibition on the Foundation's projects at the Centre Pompidou. It is beautiful." His words surprised me, but what surprised me the most was that I did not feel any bitterness. Just a sweet satisfaction. "Thank you, Marguerite," I replied sincerely. "It touches me that you have taken the time to visit the exhibition." There was a silence, then she added in a hesitant voice, "I was wondering, would it be possible that I come to visit the foundation one day? I would like to see with my own eyes everything you do." I smiled, realizing how things had changed. "Of course, Marguerite. You will be welcome when you want." After this call, I felt a deep feeling of peace. The circle finally seemed to close. I had forgiven Mark, Marguerite, and above all, I had forgiven myself to myself. Pardonated to have been naive, to have closed your eyes on certain things, to have taken so long to achieve my own value. That evening, I invited Sophie to dinner to tell her of these latest developments. We settled on the terrace, savoring a good wine and the sweetness of the evening. "You know," I said, looking at the sun going to bed on the garden, "a few months ago, I thought forgiveness was a form of weakness. But now I realize that it may be the bravest act we can do. Sophie smiled, raising her glass to drink. To your courage, my darling. And your freedom. My freedom? I asked, intrigued. Yes, your freedom, she confirmed. Small, you freed yourself from the weight of resentment, anger. You are free to be fully yourself, without the past holding you. His words resonated in me with a deep truth. I actually felt free, in a way that I had never experienced before. Free to love, to create, to dream big without fear. The following days were filled with new energy. I approached each project, each challenge with renewed enthusiasm. The foundation continued to grow, attracting media attention and professionals from around the world. We were changing things, little by little, a building at a time. One morning, when I walked in the garden before I started my workday, I had a revelation. All these trials, all these pain that I had crossed, they had led me exactly where I had to be. Without the betrayal of Mark, without the cruelty of Marguerite, I might never have found the strength to fly on my own wings, to realize my wildest dreams. I smiled, gently touching a flower that opened in the morning sun. Like this flower, I had crossed the dark to flourish in the light. Forgiveness had released me, allowing me to become the best version of myself. Returning to the house, ready to start a new day filled with challenges and possibilities, I felt a deep gratitude. Gratitude to life that had put me to the test but which had also offered me this incredible opportunity. Gratitude to the people who had supported me in difficult times, like Sophie. And even gratitude to those who had hurt me, because they had, unwittingly, pushed to grow and rise. I was Elodie Dubois, architect, visionary, free woman. And my story was just beginning.